Hello, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Ted Weitzman. I'm a computer-aided engineering specialist with the Southern Company, a large power utility in the southeastern United States. We have over 40,000 megawatts of generation, and we support over 4 million customers. I'm here today to discuss with you some topics I'll be bringing up at the Solutions 2.0 conference on July 31st as a keynote at 8 a.m. The main topics I'd like to discuss are asset management and data quality. At Southern Company, my responsibility has been taking data and producing it as a deliverable through an entire project execution process. Now, we've been doing that with drawings for many, many years, like many organizations. I'm sure the organizations you represent have engineering-related drawings and that they're managed in some way for the facilities that you work at or represent or are responsible for systems in. Well, Southern Company, we have a controlled manner of processing and managing these drawings through in-process file management. We use a tool called ProjectWise Explorer to manage our in-process content, and then we use Documentum to manage that for distribution. And for data, we manage information as it relates to engineered assets in Bentley AutoPlant and in a Cigna PDMS system. Bentley AutoPlant is predominantly for engineered assets for instrument and controls, for mechanical, and for electrical, we typically maintain those assets in the Cigna PDMS system. We have deployed in a data management system, an engineering data management system, where we normalize, consolidate, and do data quality management for those engineered assets. And we manage that information in this data warehouse for distribution. And I've been directly responsible for the configuration and deployment of that engineering data warehouse system for the organization, for Southern Company, and for integrating the processes of the iterative review of drawings and data for our project executions for distribution, including the system owners, including operations. So we are managing engineered assets, engineering information for the entire life cycle of an asset, from conceptual design all the way through the project execution, which is a release for detailed design, release for procurement, release for construction, into an as-built phase for operations and maintenance, also for any rework, as-built, retrofitting, etc., and then into eventual decommissioning. And one of the main challenges that we have faced is, and I'm going to evangelize here for a minute, and I will evangelize during the keynote as well, around how that information is managed through the project execution and that critical issue of handover to the facility. And here's one of the things that we discovered in our processes. A tag around an asset, a design functional tag as it relates to an asset that will reside at the facility, is managed in the project execution as a design functional tag. That design functional tag is married to a physical asset, a serialized, a specific make, model number, serial number of an asset that will reside as that design functional tag at the site. What we know is that when it's at the site, it will actually be managed as a plant location in a work maintenance system. And for us, that work maintenance system is Maximo. And the physical aspects of the asset, the actual asset itself as it relates to the functional tag and the plant accounts location, is the serialized number and the spare parts. And we also know that the plant's account location is a very complicated structure that has many layers. Now, this is where I evangelize to especially those in the project execution phase who are not familiar with these plant accounts locations. The design functional tag is usually enough to carry the asset through the project execution. And here's the challenge. Through the project execution, oh, and I want to point out here too that the actual structure of these, number one, the accounts, and also the structure, typical structure of a design functional location here at Southern Company. And I've seen similar functional locations at other facilities with other companies, and this model should pretty much fit. But I wanted to translate those into real looking account numbers, real looking design functional tags. And the challenge through the project execution is to marry through some sort of materials management solution, that's what we call it internally, is through the project execution, through this materials management solution, marrying the design functional tags that we see on drawings and on equipment lists with the actual serialized asset that will reside at that location, at the facility. That's the challenge to the project execution, but also the challenge to the project execution is facilitating the marrying of that design functional location to the actual hierarchical plant location that will reside in the work management system. And if you can do that, the wealth of information that is available immediately at handover, any related equipment, all documentation as it relates to that location and that physical asset, turnover code information, system startup information, manufacturing information, engineering data, work breakdown structures, a plethora of information that if you can successfully manage the serialized asset to the design functional location and then the design functional location to the plant location, the handover of the Holy Grail, all of this valuable information that's required for plant operations. What I'm proud to say is that at Southern Company, we've done tremendous due diligence around this process and have a system and a set of work processes that allow us to do this through the project execution and to hand over information to the facility, to the system owners, as it relates to the hierarchical work maintenance system at the site, on site. So, in a nutshell, what I'll talk about is our process for taking this design functional location, how we work with the system owners on site through the project execution to build and maintain the plant hierarchy as it resides in the work maintenance system, and marry that design functional asset with all of its information, including the serialized information where available. There's still some gaps to cover, with the hierarchy well before a handover to operations and maintenance, so that the provisioning of the work maintenance system is done well in advance of the handover. Now, in order to do this, and this process has been 5 years in the making, and I take this slide from an organization called FIATech, which is a nonprofit organization out of the University of Texas, and obviously in Texas and Austin, and they talk a lot about process, people, and technology as being the factors for success on these kinds of deployments, on these kinds of technology deployments. In my experience, a lot of the times the technology piece is the easier piece. It's the people and the process that require the most amount of work. And it is my belief through my work here at Southern Company that the actual focus on process aligns the people and the technology. So the focus that I've had here, predominantly the work that I've done outside of the nuts and bolts turning of and configuring of a system, has been around the process. What does the process involve? And where do the gaps shake out when you look at your current process compared to what your ideal business state is? And how do you really plug those gaps? And I plan on speaking in great detail or give a lot of lessons learned around my experience working with process, people, and technology, and deploying technology for tremendous return on investment within our organization. And I also plan to quantify some of that return on investment for the Southern Company and how deployment of technology has allowed us to drive efficiencies through our business by managing our processes and helping our people follow a set of standards and procedures that drive that efficiency through an organization. And the other thing that I really want to touch on is within the industry there's a tremendous talk and emphasis, especially through IT organizations, on concepts of one source of truth. My experience in dealing with engineered assets through a project execution is that you want one truth. You want a truth, but that truth is distributed. And what matters is how you manage that distribution and the transactions that happen between organizations and the systems that are used in those organizations. And for me, that has been key. And I do believe that you can create sources of truth. And I do believe that at certain points in project execution, you can have even what is considered one source of truth. But when you start looking at processes, you really have to look at a distributed network and how the truth is distributed across that network, and making sure that when you have transaction points that any one system represents the truth, or at least the most accurate representation of the truth that is possible at that moment. So I want to talk a little bit about that at my keynote as well. And of course, the main point here, and this is some language taken from the Reliability Web folks and Terrence O'Hanlon, is this CapEx to OpEx mentality, this capital expenditure and this operational expenditure, and a focus on operational readiness through the project execution. So transitioning from the capital execution into the operations, what does operational readiness mean, at least from my perspective, as it relates to data, and how can we bridge these gaps in our work processes? How can we bridge the gap between the EPCs, the project execution folks, and the folks on site who have their hands on the actual asset when it's turned over? And the reason we want to do that is that there's tremendous expenditure in the capital projects world, billions and billions of dollars for some of our projects. But the real cost, the real expense is in the operations for the life of a facility. And how you prepare that operations has a tremendous impact on how much it costs to maintain the facility for the life of that facility. And at Southern Company, we have a tremendous advantage in having an engineering construction services group that acts as an EPC that is actually vertically integrated with the owner. So I represent the engineering construction services arm of Southern Company, which is basically the EPC. But what I always tell folks is that the variable part of my pay is directly related to the operations of our facilities. And even though I have a project execution world and a project execution mindset, my ultimate goal for the company is to facilitate the operations of our facilities. And that's kind of key. And I'll spend some time talking about that and how that has influenced a lot of our configurations here in the project execution world for that operational readiness and in the operations for the facilities. With that, I hope that's whetted your appetite for the keynote. Again, that keynote will be Thursday, July 31st at 8 a.m. I really appreciate your time today and looking forward to see you at Solutions 2.0. For more information, please go to www.solutionsconference.info. Again, that's www.solutionsconference.info. Thanks again and take care.